Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Make sure you go check out all my books. Start with the best-selling Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and the 2 workbooks that are fillable that go right along with it, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. Also, for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Now, that's a book of pictures you give to your children, and you let them go through it, and in the pictures are lessons about security and awareness, and you, the parent, go over to teamlittlebigs.com and download the free lesson plans that go with each picture. All of this is a package that makes your life, your family more aware, safer, and able to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that exist on teamlittlebigs.com. Go check them out wherever books are sold. And let's start the show.
The black media.
I can't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
This is Jonathan Gilliam back on the Experts Podcast. And it's Friday, baby. Although it's kind of Friday every day now, so that kind of ruins that whole thing. But anyway, as always, some interesting things in the news. And we're going to discuss how bad media and politics represent statistics and data. Now, I know normally statistics and data are very boring, but not when you look at it like this. It reminds me of it's a criminal enterprise in Washington, D.C., and the way that they misrepresent all these different things that they bring up. We're going to discuss that stuff, just so I can kind of help you understand the reality of how these things work, because they can say things. I'll start off with this quick little story. There's I was watching when Comey was the FBI director, and I was watching him testify in front of Congress, and he was talking about how at any given time there are about 1,000 or a little over 1,000 terrorism investigations. And of course, and then they explain manpower and how they spend money and this and this. And everybody, of course, is amazed by that number, 1,000 terrorist investigations at any given time. And while there are real terrorists, things that happen, we just had at Naval Station Corpus Christi on the 21st. That was basically yesterday in the morning. It was about six something in the morning. A guy, maybe 2 guys, tried to run through the gate. They had these things that pop up and stop the car. He gets out and starts shooting. There may have been, the last I saw, there was one other person they suspected that was involved with it, and they hadn't caught them yet. It was on the loose. I don't know. I haven't seen an update on that. But the one guy was, I believe, was killed. And, the shooter was shot dead. But a second person of interest may be at large. That was as of yesterday at around noon. So when I heard Comey talking in front of Congress, talking about these, 1,000 investigations, terrorism investigations that are going on all the time, I remembered some statistics that I had heard while I was in the Bureau, and I was on the Joint Terrorism Task Force for part of my time there. And it was very interesting because I learned this on the criminal side, how statistics make your career. And it doesn't really matter. Like on the criminal side, you can arrest an entire criminal enterprise. It could be a small one or a large one, but if things don't change, like if you don't understand who's going to fill that vacuum, then they're going to come in and fill that vacuum, and the same crimes are going to be committed. You didn't really stop anything. You just removed a group of people so another group of people could move in there. You basically did the handiwork for the other criminal enterprise. And I saw this many, many times when I was in the Bureau on the criminal side, where we would go take different groups down, and we would leave a vacuum there, and then another group would come and fill. But when you look at the statistics of the squad, they were sky high because we were making arrests all the time and working on the street all the time, but never really solving anything. And now the squad that I was on were amazing. The guys that I worked with were amazing, but this is a product of how the Bureau works and how law enforcement in general, in a lot of ways, work. But it's how statistics and government work as well. You look at that squad, you would say they are the most successful squad in the New York office. However, if you look at the reality of what crimes are still out on the street, there wasn't a lot of success. It was a lot of arrests and very little change. So when I heard Comey saying this, the reality is, folks, if you actually went and actually scoured the records of actual terrorists that were caught up in an investigation where people were either planning to commit a terrorist act, or they had a real associations with a terrorist group that was planning, or they attempted to carry it out, or they did carry it out, you would see that it is far less than 1,000, way less than 100. And I don't know, and I'm not going to go into the exact numbers of what is what, but it's easy to see. I mean, it's open source information. All you got to do is go back the past couple of years and see how many of these terrorist incidents happened, or how many cases were. Because here's the bad part about the other part about how they do this is that they tell the news everything. You have an investigation on bad guys, you wrap that up, they automatically tell the media about it. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, one of my criticisms of the president, who I'm a supporter of, one of my criticisms of him, though, because I don't follow anyone blindly, is the fact that he blabs what we do just as much as his predecessors. And they may be doing more now that they're not telling us, but he tells just as much as the person before. Every other press conference are talking about how they did this or did that. A lot of the times it's statistics. Like today, I was listening to him talk about the VA. I don't know who's feeding him these statistics about how great the VA is now. There have been changes. He said they had fired over 8,000 people who were literally unfireable before. But I don't know if the treatment that he's being told and the things about the VA, these changes, I don't think it's quite the way he sees it. Now, that's just what I've seen being in and around the VA. But when it comes to these terrorist investigations, what you have to realize is that an investigation, yes, there's 1,000 investigations every year or more of terrorism in the United States. But the majority of those are some guy from Iraq or Afghanistan who's pissed off because, the guy that he knew is over here now, and he owes him $1,500. So he'll call the FBI and say, there's a terrorist in New York City, or something like that. Or maybe somebody's angry one day because something happened, and they say something in front of somebody at a mosque, like, I'd like to, do something here. And they go and tell the Bureau. It gets back to a source, and it gets reported, and then they start investigating it. Most of the time, almost all the time, those investigations are vetted out. We follow the people, we pull all their records, we, just like a regular case, and it ends up being nothing. And so the truth, when you look at these statistics, they're misleading. There's 1,000 or more investigations in terrorism every year in the United States, but the reality is only a few of those actually turn out to be real terrorists. Now, that's not saying we're wrong for investigating those things. It's just that when the media, or when Comey sits in front of Congress and when the media reports it, people don't realize what they're saying. They're not saying that we defeat 1,000 terrorists a year in the United States. They're saying that there was 1,000 or more investigations and man hours that were put into that investigation a year. But it's not saying that there are those many actual terrorists or terrorist incidents or terrorist arrests. That's a totally different number, but they don't say those numbers. They don't give you those numbers. So when we look at what I was when I was going through the news last night, I was actually going to do. I've got a really weird schedule, and it was weird already because I'm a nocturnal individual. My whole family is, well, I shouldn't say my whole family. My mom is definitely a night person. I'm a night person, and when I started, and I'm always up at night, so that's a lot of times that's when I do my podcast because it's very quiet, and I can release it early in the morning the next morning. But I sat here reading the news last night, and I kept seeing these different things. I don't want to use the term, I went down the rabbit hole, because I don't want the Q people out there thinking that, I'm any way associated with them. They've seemed to have claimed that term of going down the rabbit hole. I just got in an argument with somebody on Facebook a little while ago about that. But I kept seeing these stories, and two in particular on Drudge Report, both stories on Drudge. If you look at these stories, one says, and this is from the Charleston Gazette Mail, I guess in Charleston, South Carolina, I believe Charleston is. Hot spots erupt. Researchers warn of second wave in the South, talking about the coronavirus. And it says Dallas, Houston, Southeast Florida, Gold Coast, the entire state of Alabama, and several other places in the South that have been rapidly reopening their economies are in danger of a second wave of coronavirus infections. Now, those of you that listen to this podcast know that I take the virus very seriously. It is not, I don't believe it's a joking matter at all. And I don't appreciate when people come on and say, we've wasted the past 2 months, or this virus is nothing more than the flu. It is more than the flu. The flu season lasts a lot longer, and people say, it killed 80,000 people a couple of years ago, the flu, but it didn't do it in a month. Right? So there's a dramatic difference between this and the flu. I had it. I know somebody who died from it, and I have another neighbor who died from it, 48 years old. It's serious and very contagious. But we can't even listen to the statistics or the models that the CDC and these other incompetent government agencies give, because they fall into this same nonsense of releasing information that is misleading, or it's not verified. Even they haven't verified a lot of this information. I do know that the virus, from personal experience, is highly contagious, deadly, and is weird. I explained this before, but it was not like the flu. The flu, you get sick, you stay sick for 2 weeks. This, one day you feel on top of the world, that within 12 hours, or sometimes even 3 hours later, you are dragging ass and you have a burning sensation as though you swallowed cayenne pepper inside your body. And then the next day, my joints, everywhere I'd been injured, my joints were inflamed and seriously in pain. Still, I have some after effects of, like in my Achilles heel and one of my knees, where the weakness and the pain is still there. Wasn't there in early March or middle of March. It came after I got infected by the virus. So the CDC doesn't mention all those things, and their statistics are all over the place. So anyway, let me get back to this story. They're saying that in the South this summer, they're not even saying that it's, most statistics show that these viruses die down in the summer because of the heat. They're not even saying that in this story. They're completely missing that whole statistic. But they're saying as the economies are reopened, there's a rapid growth of the virus in these certain hotspots. And they give these statistics. Remember, I saw both of these stories at pretty much the same time. And they're saying that, let me see where it's at here, that their preliminary signs, however, that hotspots, new clusters of coronavirus spread could soon flare in parts of South and Midwest. They're saying that they were up in some cases like 1,000% or 1,500% or 800%. They're saying that, and they go into the detail, the data about the ventilators, the number of ventilators that are there versus the number that they will need and they may not have if it spikes in these certain areas. And here's the thing, when you look at the numbers, right? You look at the statistics and they say it went up in 10 days, 18% since the opening of Friday. That's what they were saying in Monroe County, New York. That's in home of Rochester hospitalizations. They said that they've risen 70% over the past 10 days and 18% since reopening began on Friday. All right. Now, that sounds like a tremendous amount, but when you look at the other story that I pulled up at the same time, let me pull that up. It's actually a map that shows where and how things are either decreasing or increasing and the percentage at which it has grown. Let's take Arkansas, for instance, where I'm from. It says it's up 14%. So May 12th, they had 95.4.4. I don't know where they get that from. It should just be 95. I mean, how are they going to get a quarter of a person? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But they had 95.4 new cases. But May 19th, they had 108 new cases. So when you say 14%, it's not a tremendous amount. We're talking, 100 cases. And in the grand scheme of things, that's not enough to shut a state down. Arkansas has not really been shut down, by the way. Texas, May 12th, they had 1,097 new cases. May 19th, 1,266. That's up 15%. Florida, they say they're up 12%. But you got to remember, from May 12th to May 19th, people could have caught this on May 12th or before they unlocked things, and they didn't show signs. And then May 19th, they started to feel bad, so they go get a test. Because not all people immediately feel bad. Some people don't. So these statistics don't really say a whole lot. When you look at, if I was to say that the number of cases is up 41% in North Carolina, you'd be like, holy cow, that state's going to die. Half the population's going to die. Well, it's not. 441 people as of May 12th. On May 19th, there were 622 new cases. So, yes, that is, a couple hundred more cases than they had before, on average. They had 441 before. Now they had 622 new cases. But it's not a parallel. That's the number of new cases, not the percentage of population. When you go through here, New York, for instance, it says it's down 17%. So they had 2,470 new cases. That's average, May 12th. But in May 19th, they had 2,051 new cases. Now, here's the difference in that statistic. They're saying it's down 17%, but New York is still up 2,000 new cases. That is significant. That's significant. You look at Missouri, 155 cases in May 12th, May 19th, 153. So they're actually down 1%. But these percentages are not telling you the reality of how many in these small states where there's not a lot going on, like in Arkansas or in Missouri or in Mississippi, they're up plus 6%. I mean, it was probably pretty much the same thing before they started letting people out. And in fact, I would guarantee you, if we went and looked at who was getting sick, It's a lot of these quote unquote essential workers that are out there every single day, and they get complacent and they touch things and they don't wash their hands. Here's a good one. 7-day average of new cases up 100% in Montana. That if I told you and reported on the news today in Montana, 7-day average of new cases was up 100%. Well, May 12th, they had 0.7 cases. I don't know how you have 0.7 cases. Maybe it's 0.7. No, it's 0.7. It just says 0.7 cases. New cases. May 19th, 1.4. That means 1 1/4 person had gotten coronavirus. Maybe it was a guy and his dog. I don't know. But it's up 100%. So you see, that is a perfect example of how these statistics are totally misused. And if you go read the story that I was just reading a second ago, it's going to make it sound like the South is just killing it with new cases. But you look in Texas, May 12th, 1,097 cases. May 19th, this is a 7-day average, 1,266. That's up 15%. You go to Illinois, or better yet, let's go to Michigan. Michigan, that is totally locked down and ran by a complete imbecile, is up 19%. Texas is totally, well, not totally open, but it's pretty open. People are going to bars and hanging out. It's up 15%. So I would think that that's a little bit of a, it shows that there's a certain amount of people that are just going to get this virus. I mean, I don't know why Michigan is so high considering the fact that it's so locked down, but maybe it's just because they have more inner city. I mean, everybody tries to make that into a minority thing, but I think it really has to do with the fact that they may not be clamping down as hard in Michigan in the inner city. Maybe the cops just don't go in there and enforce it. And there's a lot of places in Michigan in Detroit where the cops don't go. So if they don't go there, these people are going to be out doing whatever they want. It has nothing to do with race. It's just that that's where the violence happens and cops don't go there. I mean, I would say that there are predominant races in those areas, but I don't think it would really matter what race the people are. If it's an impoverished area, they're going to be left to their own devices. It's terrible the way that things are ran in the United States as far as that goes, but it is what it is, and that's the way it works. When you look at all these liberal states, even when they say that they're down 17% like New York, they're still getting 2,000 people a day sick, or every 7 days here sick. New cases. Florida's, everybody I talked to in Florida said they just been doing whatever they wanted, living the way they wanted the whole time. Their 7-day average is 717 new cases as of May 19th. It's up 12%. Go back to Michigan, up 19%. Totally locked down. You go to California, they say they're down 6%, but the number of cases is 1,773 in a 7-day period. So anyway, I could go on and on looking at this thing. It's ridiculous, but they're making these stories out to be something that they're not by skewing the information. And this happens all the time in government and in media, constantly. None of this stuff, remember, can really be affirmed by any of these labs or any of these specialists. 1 week you have doctors telling you wear gloves, the next week they're telling you not. 1 week they're telling you to wear masks, then they're saying masks don't do any good. Then they're going back and saying masks actually do good. They're telling you that when this first started, that they found on a cruise ship a virus that had been living for 14 days. Now, how they knew it would have been 14 days, I don't know. But they were telling everybody this thing could live up like a half a month on a surface, a contact surface. So you can catch it from, leaning on a pool table or a coffee table. But now they're saying that's not true. So I can't trust any of these stats. All I can trust is that there's something out there. It does kill, and it's highly contagious if you come in contact with it. That's the one thing that I do know. I also know that the Constitution wouldn't, as far as it was written in what the founding fathers were considering, does not add up to what I've been seeing with the almost tyrannical actions of law enforcement under the direction of these leftist governors and mayors. You know, I was watching a video that came out of Orange County. I think it was in San Clemente, California. I think that's where it was. It was in Orange County, the one city where they had not taken down the temporary fences that block people from going to the beach. And every other town or city in Orange County had taken theirs down except for this one. The city manager is the one who put the fence up without getting it approved by the city council. The city manager is not an elected official. I guess he's appointed probably by the city council. He made the decision to put the fence up, didn't even talk to the city council, which is, I guess, against the law there. But then when the city council decided to do something about it, they had to vote on it. Why would you have to vote on it? You should just say, take it down. But here's what's interesting. The vote came up 2-2. So they were at a stalemate. So residents were like, screw this. We're going to go out there. And so one of the guys held on to the fence. He's a 30-year Marine and didn't want to let go, or wouldn't let go. And they called the sheriff's department out there by the city manager, I guess, who was called the sheriff's department out there. I know these sheriffs have a job to do. I know they do. And I'm sure some of them don't like being out there. But they understand, unless they're idiots, they have to realize that what is happening now has edged over from the authority of the state to protect the people to the point where the people say, I choose to go out, and if I get sick, I get sick. And of course, the state's argument with that is it's not you go get sick, but then you could give it to someone else. But as we're seeing, that's the majority of people who are going out and getting this virus have gotten it from someone else. That they like for instance, in New York, where they put all the elderly people that had it in elderly homes where they knew it was dangerous, and those people caught it, and they're just dying by the dozens in these places. Other locations, people get it because they're out and about all the time, and they're not taking care of themselves. So I started to say something a minute ago. It may have sounded like I was saying that they were getting it from other people, but it really comes down to the fact of, are you going to go out and risk it and not wash your hands, not wear a mask, and throw caution to the wind? You may very well get it. But if you go out, you wash your hands constantly, you wear a mask, you could still get it if somebody's out there flaunting it around, but you're less likely to. And if you stay at home and that's your choice, that's fine. And I understand how at first the reaction was to lock it down so that we could possibly avoid a mass infection. And that may have actually worked. But now we're to the point where, and I'm just going over stuff that everybody already knows, economically we can't stay locked down. And not only that, but the people don't want to be protected anymore. They understand the protection that happened at first, but it's ruined businesses, ruined lives, and now they want to go back out and live their life. And many people are like, I'll throw caution to the wind. And that's totally different than when the government comes in and says, we have to lock things down for your safety. I get it, right? There's an earthquake coming. A virus just started. Hurricane is coming. So they make you either evacuate or lock down. They're not going to come and help you. And they tell you that. I get it. That's your choice. But they also have certain rules that they got to do to try to protect the people from this imminent threat. However, if things continue to spiral towards another destructive way, or people are just going nuts because they've been kept inside for so long, it's not the government's right to tell you in this state or in this country that you're not free to move unless you are detained. after a period of time. And I don't think that there's I don't know what the law says, but I know what the Constitution says and how that reflects. And I know if I was going to arrest you, I have a limited amount of time to hold you, to find out and investigate the circumstances. If we have probable cause or evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed a murder or crime, a vicious crime, we can arrest you, and then we're holding you. But let's say that we think a murder just happened. We don't know, and you're there. We can detain you while we figure out what's happening. That's the way I look at this whole lockdown situation. We were detained for a period of time for our safety and for the safety of the state and the republic. But now there's really no reason to be holding us captive because the people don't want it. They want to be let go. There's no evidence that massive amounts of people are going to be kept from getting sick. Now, you thought I was going to say there's no evidence that massive amounts of people are going to get sick, but there's no evidence that you can keep the people from getting sick. Majority, now, of course, this is another statistic that we may or may not be able to trust, but there's statistics saying that, and quote unquote experts saying that the majority of cases that are coming in are people that have already been quarantined and somehow got sick while they were at home. Bottom line with this, if God wants you home, he's going to take you home. Now, I don't believe in being stupid or challenging God. I'm not one of these people who says, like when I try to counsel churches for going down to Central South America and doing these missions in Honduras, one of the most dangerous places in the world. And I tell them, why don't you collect the money through donations of the people who would go down there and pay for a certain amount of people from Honduras to come here, train them how to do the medical stuff, train them how to drive a backhoe, train them how to do these things, and send them back down there with money for the community. That makes sense from a security standpoint. And I've had meetings before, and I've had people tell me, well, God will protect us. Well, God also says, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. When Jesus was being tempted by the devil, and he said, throw yourself off this mountain and I'll have the angels pick you back up. And he said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And I believe when we look at these situations with these churches and stuff, you shouldn't tempt the Lord and say, well, he's got my back. You don't know. You shouldn't put him in that situation. And the same thing goes with this virus. I believe you should be able to make the choice to go out, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to get the virus, and you need to take responsibility for that, not say that God will get you through it. If you put him in that situation, it's really going to be up to, whether or not you come in contact with that virus. But regardless, if it's your time to die, it's going to be your time to die. But what they're finding, and I feel like I'm rambling, what they're finding is that even people who stay home are getting this virus in large numbers. So none of that evidence is ever looked at or mentioned, except for a little side note, when these leftist governors and idiotic people on the right and corrupt people on the left are making these laws that we still got to keep people there or keep a fence up or whatever they're doing. It really makes no sense. In the case in Orange County, where I got away from that, was that the sheriff's department showed up and was threatening to shoot them with less than lethal arms. Now, we're not talking about drug dealers or people that are threatening violence. A guy was holding on to a fence, and the sheriff's department is talking about if they don't disperse, they're going to shoot them with non-lethal weapons. This wasn't a violent protest. People were being, were pushing back a little bit, but they're telling the cops the whole time, we respect you. We love you guys. We back the blue. This isn't like the left when they protest. And maybe this is the problem with the right, is that they don't know how to protest. But as soon as the cops started pushing forward, they all dispersed. I don't know what happened to the guy, if he got arrested or not. The video ended before that. But the bottom line of all this stuff, I keep saying that, the bottom line of all this stuff is that statistics are manipulated, truth is suppressed, and law enforcement is being used to be the henchman for all this. You cannot trust. If anything you've learned out of this whole event is that you cannot, I call my show The Experts, But there's very rare do I ever seek the advice of somebody who is in an executive position in government. There are great people. I've met them, but I'm not going to take the chance that they may be a part of this leftist or incompetent cabal that's up in and around Washington, D.C. and at the top of these agencies. I'd rather have somebody that was on the ground, that did the work and understands that, they were never a career climber, because really to reach those levels of executive in government, you're doing less operating and a lot more ladder climbing, a lot more box checking. And I'm not interested in having those people on the show. I don't consider those people experts. I consider them politicians. So unfortunately on television, a lot of these people claim to be experts, or like Fox News has on every other day. Today was Marie Harf again. You know, I did a tweet this week saying that if somebody is announced on a TV or radio program as former public affairs officer or a press secretary of an agency, you can almost bet that they know nothing about the subject that they're about to school you on. That is almost always the case. Marie Harf is a perfect example of that. And those are the people that they consider experts now. And they're literally giving advice on television. Ridiculous. So I hope that that's clear and helps you look at these things a little bit better when you're seeing these statistics. Pause. That's my biggest thing, is when you get into a circumstance where you're not clear, pause and collect the information. Figure out what game is being played on you, because it's actually, you can figure out the game. I wanted to play Lou Dobbs' interview. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick, because I really do want you to hear part of this interview with the acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner, Mark Morgan. And this really stands out as we're talking about the reality of statistics, promises, and how when the president says he wants to do this, a lot of whether or not it gets done is not even up to the president. It's really up to these senior executives to carry out that policy that the president wants enacted. But just listen to this interview. It is fascinating.
One of the nation's top federal immigration and border security officials is the man responsible for enforcement of those travel restrictions. He joins us tonight from Washington, D.C., Acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Mark Morgan. Mark, good to have you with us.
Now, let me just say this. I've been on Lou Dobbs' show several times, and I love this guy. He is a professional, super nice guy, and a professional when we are in the studio. I don't know about working for him, but I really respect the guy a tremendous amount. And I think he's done as Fox News and all these other networks have moved to the left and increasingly degraded the career of journalism or reporting from a show host point of view. Lou Dobbs still stands true to truth. And I think it shows through, especially in this interview. So he just interviewed Mark Morgan, the Acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner. So listen to this.
A lot of questions are arising. The announcement that some airports would be, for example, screening for temperatures, when I think much of the country just assumed that was taking place in the face of this pandemic. Why is it only taking place now?
Well, Lou, let's go back to what you started and what this president did, that historic, unprecedented travel restrictions.
Commissioner, let me say, Mark, you and I, we know each other well. I assure you, I respect you deeply, and I've always felt that was reciprocated. Let's deal with what I'm asking, because it's important. It's very important. The history, this audience understands the history. The reality is that those temperature checks, most Americans believed they were already in place. Why were they not?
Well, right now, look, I'm coming this from a law enforcement perspective, so I'm not the medical expert here.
Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Now, I don't know Mark Morgan. I don't have an opinion of him, good or bad. So when I'm saying that this is bad information or wrong answer, I'm just looking at it from an effective point of view. I'm not trying to degrade him or the president or anybody for that matter, even people on the left. I don't know Nancy Pelosi. I don't know Chuck Schumer. I don't know these people, but I can tell you that they're the totality of the circumstances or totality of the behavior that they present is outrageous, egregious, and it just spews political incompetence and leadership incompetence. When I look at these people, that may have sounded like I was judging them, but I'm not. I'm staying neutral, and I'm saying, like, if they all of a sudden surprise me, like I thought believe it or not, I thought Governor Cuomo at the very beginning of this crisis, for about the first week, was the most calm and collected, well-spoken person out of all the governors on television. Even I thought he was doing better press conferences than President Trump. But that quickly deteriorated into because this is what happens with narcissists. Anybody who's ever dated a narcissist, they'll tell you, they put on a great show at first, and then it's all about them. And that's what happened with Cuomo. Whereas the president's still working things out, and he's at this pinnacle of near disaster. No matter which point he turns, he's handling it quite well. Cuomo's killed 5,000 people. So, and I know people say, well, 95,000 people have died on Trump's watch. Well, that's not the same. You know, people around this country like me, when I got it, had nothing to do with Trump. You know, when the two people that I know died, it had nothing to do with Trump. But Cuomo gave a speech talking about how these elderly clinics are timber boxes. Then he went there and lit the match by sticking elderly people that were COVID positive in those places. That's totally different. So when I look at this guy from a neutral perspective, his first answer, which I'll play again, is bad.
This audience understands the history. The reality is that those temperature checks, most Americans believed they were already in place. Why were they not?
Well, right now, look, I'm coming this from a law enforcement perspective.
You're coming at this from the directors, the acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner. You are in charge. So I don't care if you're a doctor. You should have the answers to this, and you should be making sure that the president's policies are carried out. And you're not. And that's suspicious to me.
So I'm not the medical expert here. So what we are doing, though, is we are working with the CDC, HHS, and other healthcare providers to come up with a solution that is effective.
Which, obviously, they're not doing a very good job of it. Because as you're about to hear, they've been letting massive amounts of people fly into this country from China.
Common sense, effective solution.
China.
And right now, Lou, what we've done, those entering the countries, including those areas, with CBP, we have screened almost 300,000 people. That means 300,000 people that have come in, we have effectively screened them and then pushed them.
Okay, so now this guy who just claimed 30 seconds ago that he's not a doctor and he's not capable of making medical decisions is now saying that medically all these people were properly screened. Okay, unless they are sitting them there for 14 days and then checking them, giving them a test and seeing if they're positive or negative, and then making sure that they sit right there for 14 days and don't go anywhere. Don't go outside wherever you're quarantined. Don't even go outside the airport. And then in 14 days, they test them again, see if they're positive or negative. If they're not doing that, they're not doing effective testing. This taken to see if you have a fever nonsense is crap, because I started feeling bad days before I got a fever. And everybody else that I know was the same way. We started feeling it. And the person that I got it from was having symptoms, but they weren't massively noticeable symptoms. So although they were listed in his documents when he was released from the elderly clinic to his family. He was there for 2 weeks for rehab on his neck. That's it. And because they were shuffling people in there with COVID, he got infected while he was in there. And then they lied and released him to the family, and everybody got it. And he collapsed in the driveway. And that's how, we got infected. This guy is not speaking the truth. And I'm suspicious of this.
On to medical experts for further screening. So that
what
is
does
being
that mean?
done. Now, what we've done from that 300,000, only a handful have been identified needing further screening and ultimately were found to have COVID. So
that is terrifying to me, that people were coming in here with COVID on a plane. And so they test people. Okay, so let's say that person came in here that has COVID. He sat on a plane with somebody. I'm assuming it's a he. He sat on a plane with somebody, coughed or did whatever he did. Other people were infected. They get off that plane. They get tested. Or maybe they hold them to screen them a little bit longer. They don't show any signs. What are they going to do now? Let them go? They go into quarantine. But they're not, it's not like they're monitoring him for the time that they're here in quarantine.
Right now, those screening procedures, they're effective. That doesn't mean we can't continue to improve, and we are having those discussions.
Mm-hmm. It's not effective, and this is, again, exactly what I started the show about. What they say and what reality is are two different things. What you just heard from that guy is a BS structured narrative that he's trying to tell Lou Dobbs. And Lou doesn't really he doesn't believe it. I don't believe it. And it's, the whole thing is like wishful thinking, but that's what they do, because the majority of people they'll just buy it and just move on.
Okay. And that's terrific. We're 3 months into this. And the reality is that temperatures apparently haven't been taken to this point, or there wouldn't have been an announcement last week that you were beginning those temperature screenings. Secondly, there's a ban on travel from China. There is a ban, as you know, the other regions and countries. And yet, I think, again, most Americans are surprised to learn we're talking about millions of people, not hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands coming into this country from nations that were banned. And we're not talking about U.S. nationals. We're talking about foreign nationals.
This is crazy that this is happening. It blows my mind. I understand how government works, and this is blowing my mind that this stuff is allowed to happen under the Trump administration. And let me tell you, if I found out that Trump was involved in allowing this to happen and lying to the American people, I would be the first on not because I want to burn Trump, but I would call him out on it. But what I suspect is happening is the same thing I told a story about before, where Department of Homeland Security, somebody I knew that was an executive there, the President Bush gave them a policy that he wanted carried out, and the director didn't like it. Or one of the undersecretaries or somebody didn't like it. So they sat on it until he was out of office, and then it just went away. That's the power that these people have. So the fact that millions of people have come in here from China and other places in Europe since the president locked it down is very troubling to me.
Look, Lou, this president has been very clear as well, is there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance between addressing the very real concerns from a public health standpoint as well as an economic standpoint. That is a challenging balance.
And again, he's conflating the reality of what the economic issue is in this country with this statement about people coming in under his watch in that agency.
We have to take both of those into account. We have to be thoughtful and methodical as we're applying that. But we just can't turn off and shut everything off.
Yes, you can. You say you can't fly to America. It's really that easy. I mean, if we are told we can't leave our homes in certain places, if we're told you can't go eat at a restaurant, you can't travel from place to place, then why is it so hard to say you can't send people here to this country on a plane for this period of time?
Have to be reasonable and methodical about that and balance that. And right now, one of the things we're doing is we're piloting certain additional screening to see if it's effective. Lou, you know as well as I do, and so do your listeners, is
how about you don't pilot the program, you go and figure out if it's effective, and then you wait for the virus to go down in those other countries before you let people in. Well, there's no effective thinking here at all. It's like crazy hour, and they just run around in circles like chickens with their heads cut off. I don't know if you know that, those of you who are listening, but my grandma used to go out there and cut the chicken's head off so then she could cook it, and the body would run around with no head for, 30 seconds or more. Flopping all over, running full speed, body all by itself, no head. Craziest thing I've ever seen. But that's what this sounds like. He's not a doctor. He's not qualified to give medical advice or to analyze it from a medical standpoint. Then he's analyzing it from a medical standpoint. Then he says, yes, there was a shutdown. And then he says, well, there has to be a compromise. It's back and forth nonsense with this guy. I don't know him. I don't care if he's offended by this. From an effective standpoint of thinking, this is utter nonsense, everything that he said so far.
Look, a lot of people are asymptomatic with this. So even a temperature check, look, I'm not a medical health professional.
Okay, yeah, we know that. Okay, but you're going to dispense some medical knowledge here. I have a strange feeling in just a few seconds.
We know there are a lot of people who have had screening who are completely asymptomatic, including the temperature check, that later were found out to have COVID. So we have to be reasonable.
No, I understand.
We have to do this by a data-driven approach.
No. That is absolutely wrong, but that's what an executive would say because he's not an operator. He may have been at one point, but it's not now. A data-centered approach is not what you need. It is simply, we can't screen whether or not they are sick. They don't come here. What is so difficult about that? Somebody who has operational experience would sit here and say, if you go by the numbers on this one, you're going to come up short because the numbers, nobody knows what the exact numbers are. Nobody knows what the statistics are. Nobody knows anything. I was talking to somebody the other day. They don't have any smell or taste. And the doctor says, don't worry, that'll clear up in about a month. How do they know that? They don't know that. There's not been any studies done with COVID and loss of smell and taste and how long it takes for it to come back. They may know that with other things. They don't know about it with this disease. Not smart to say that. Not correct to say that. And that's the way this guy is. It infuriates me when I hear people like this spew this stuff, these executives.
And I comprehend that part. Like you, I'm not a medical expert, but I'm something of if you will, an educated person when it comes to screening, immigration, in fact, in ports of entry, in what is de rigueur across the country. Even that has not been followed, is my understanding. And by the way, you said that on this broadcast, that we were taking the words of people traveling from those countries as to whether or not their origin was what they said it was. And I'm wondering, have we become more sophisticated and competent in that regard?
No. I'll answer it for you, Lou. No. But let's listen to what he has to say.
Lou, we have been, and we're constantly.
Okay. Folks, I'm telling you right now, that's a lie. We have not become any more sophisticated at determining who people are, where they're from. I mean, the fact is, in many of these liberal states, they don't even allow the police to identify who they are. So how is what he's saying even remotely true when he says, yes? Let's keep playing that.
monitoring and shifting to improve what we're doing. I'll give you an example. Just this week, the president authorized the extension of 2 very important travel restrictions at our land POEs, our ports of entry, as well as in between the ports of entry. The CDC issued an order extending the order that's been very effective. Those coming across our border illegally. Now with that order, that CDC order, we're able to remove those individuals immediately back to Mexico within an hour. That means we're not bringing them in our facilities. We're not exposing our workforce or the immigrants or American citizens. Just before COVID, we had over 3,500 individuals in our holding facilities. And now because of the CDC's order and that travel restriction, we have less than 100. That's citizens. Just before COVID, we had over 3,500 individuals in our
3,500. And if you go down to the Arizona border, you can estimate, if you look at the amount of backpacks that are down there, just the drug mules, and a lot of times they're bringing people over, 5 people, 100 people. It could be, you're looking at, per square mile, hundreds of thousands of these backpacks that they carry. They're all the same backpack. You're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people coming over that one spot where Sheriff Lamb is the sheriff down there in Arizona. In that one spot, that's how many people come over. And he's bragging about 3,500 people and how they've reduced that to 100. I mean, I know for a fact, secondhand, I talked to a former Border Patrol guy. I know he's still on active duty, actually, was telling me that his boss, they saw approximately 180 people cross the border one day, and his boss said, ignore it. And he's like, why? He goes, if they find out that people are flowing over here, we're going to have the bosses down here, and and this is going to turn into a madhouse. Just ignore it. Yeah. So whatever this guy's saying about 3,500 people is a moot statement. It doesn't matter, because all these other people are coming over and they have no technology and no way to screen them, because it hasn't been effectively dealt with, not by Trump, not by Obama, not by Bush, not by Clinton, not by Bush 41, not by Reagan, not by Carter. It has not been dealt with.
holding facilities. And now because of the CDC's order and that travel restriction, we have less than 100. That's an effective containment mitigation strategy. At our land ports of entry, we have the non-essential travel, as I know you've talked about. Right after that was instituted, we saw a drop of over 400,000 people per day entering this country. Lou,
a drop of 400,000 per day entering the country. That's due to Trump and his policies. But we're talking about a lot more than that entering the country on a daily basis. He's just talking about from ports of entry.
400,000 people. That's an effective containment and mitigation strategy. They are working. Does that mean we can't improve? No. We're constantly working with people. We're working with USG officials. We're working with local leaders to see where we can improve.
No, they're not. No, they're not. The people that are executives in these agencies, like Mark Morgan, he's an acting director, but they don't want to change things. They don't want to evolve because it costs money and because they're not competent enough to do that. You actually have to be a competent individual in your area of operations to understand where and how things need to evolve. And these people aren't interested in that. In fact, those people who show up and say we can make a change here or here for the better, those are the people, as I was talking about yesterday in the podcast, those are the people that are suppressed. This guy's ridiculous.
Well, and I commend you for that, because so many government agencies, in fact, never acknowledge that there is room for improvement.
That's enough. And I love Lou. I think he ended it right there with a really good statement, because it's just the whole thing is horrible. And that whole interview was full of lies. Now, I want to just say a couple other things, and I'm going to go. Happy Friday, by the way. Judges and their political ties are a guarded factor in tyranny. Remember that. Okay, that's my own quote. What you saw with Whitmer, Governor Whitmer in Michigan, where she overstepped her legal boundaries, clearly overstepped her legal boundaries and what she's doing up there. A judge said that she hadn't. And these judges are very leftist. And of course, just like the judge for Flynn's case comes in, and if he didn't have good lawyers that were appealing certain things, Flynn would be done for. And they don't even hide it anymore. But these judges are a sticking point. They're a sticking point for allowing the Constitution to flourish and the freedom to flourish. But nobody considers them as an active part of tyranny, but they are. One last story. I saw this story about in San Francisco, they literally went to the parks and painted big circles every 6 feet. And that's where you have to go, and that's your little circle. People in this country, because they're lazy, because they're afraid to take care of themselves, they put the power into the politicians. They hire the politicians, vote them into office, because they want them to take care of them. They want those politicians to take care of them, and like an uncle who's a narcissist, who wants praise and feels, and that's why the narcissistic uncle takes care of him, because at first he's really good to them, and then you start to see that's all about him, and it becomes a real burden on the children. I'm just making this up, but that's what it's like. People vote these weirdos like Gavin Newsom or de Blasio here in New York, or Cuomo in. They vote them into office, or Whitmer. And what do? At first they really, we're going to give you money. We're going to take care of you. And then when the crap really hits the fan, the people suffer, because these people don't care about him. They're like the narcissistic uncle. He didn't care. And these people don't care about you. They care about themselves. And it's as if they're treating the people like they're stupid, right? Don't buy seeds like Whitmer. The way that de Blasio does his press conferences, slurping on his cup of coffee. Total disrespect to the people, talking down to them, making it sound like they don't know anything, that they're stupid. But here's the problem. The people turn out to be stupid, because they go out and they sit in those circles and they do exactly what the government says and no more. So I guess the moral of the story is today, don't be stupid. Don't trust the statistics that they tell you. Question those statistics. And look at what these people are saying. If it doesn't take somebody with experience in law enforcement to understand that acting director, Mark Morgan, was giving Lou Dobbs a line throughout the whole thing. These are things that you can insist upon, folks. Listen, have a great Friday. I'm spun up. I'm sweating. I'm so spun up. I love all of you. I want to say a special shout out to all those who have served this country at home and abroad, in battle, in training, in other jobs outside of the military. The veterans that went on and served somewhere else and then ended up passing. You all are my heroes. And God blessed us when He gave you. And we thank you for that. That's the truth. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. God bless the veterans. And God bless all those who've given their life. Peace. And we're out of here.